It all started with a routine deep-sea mapping operation. The USS Hawthorne, equipped with state-of-the-art sonar, was scanning the ocean floor in search of geological anomalies or historic shipwrecks. The team had done this countless times before. Nothing unusual, but today, the ocean had other plans. "Commander, you must see this." The voice of sonar specialist Ryan Caldwell cut through the roar of the ship's engine. His voice was tense, almost trembling. Commander Eric Sutherland, a seasoned officer with 20 years of service, walked up to the monitor. Grainy sonar images showed an airplane-shaped object at a depth of 13,000 feet. He was intact, oddly enough. "Is this crash known?" Sutherland asked in an even voice. But inside he felt a clenching sensation. Caldwell shook his head. "There are no reports of any disasters in this region, sir." This raised alarm bells. Every aircraft shot down, civilian or military, was entered into official records. If something happened in these waters, they had to know about it. However, this aircraft was not on any list. It was, in essence, a ghost. Using remotely operated vehicles, the team aimed cameras down to take a closer look. As the dark depths cleared, the outline of a long-forgotten plane appeared. The fuselage, although covered in barnacles and silt, looked unnaturally intact. Lieutenant Mark noted that this thing should be broken into pieces. Davidson, an expert in aircraft restoration. Most planes that fall into the ocean at high speed fall apart. This plane appears to have been abandoned there. As they examined the wreckage, new oddities began to emerge. The plane had no tail number, no identification marks, or any other markings. Its design suggested a 1940s or 1950s model, but it did not match any known military aircraft. And here was the most unpleasant detail. The cargo bay doors were still closed. Sutherland felt a chill run down his spine. When the plane crashed, the pressure from the impact alone was enough to puncture the cargo hold, but this one was sealed. "Call me a rescue team," he ordered. "We are raising this case." Raising the sunken ship from such a depth was no easy task. The operation required precision, patience, and top-notch equipment. A team of naval divers, engineers, and forensic analysts was assembled on board the Hawthorne. Upon arrival, the team prepared for a challenging mission. At first, underwater vehicles were used, their robotic manipulators clearing away silt and debris. The metal, although aged, was surprisingly little corroded for something that had presumably been underwater for decades. Chief Engineer Laura Fields reviewed the video footage. "Strange," she muttered. "Aircraft aluminum is highly susceptible to corrosion over time in salt water. He should be in much worse condition." Despite the eerie state of preservation, the search continued. Powerful lifting cables were attached to the fuselage, and a slow ascent began. As the plane rose above the surface, fish and sea creatures scattered, as if sensing something unnatural. When the plane finally lifted off the surface, water cascaded off its hull. He was carefully lifted onto the deck, where he remained standing, mysteriously dripping salty water. The air around him became heavier, as if the debris had brought with it some invisible burden. The search team stood around the plane, feeling a mixture of curiosity and concern. The exterior, though battered and aged, still held up unnaturally well. Davison ran his hand over the fuselage, feeling the rough texture of the barnacles. "This thing should be in pieces," he muttered, "or at least have more structural damage. It looks like it was somehow preserved." Sutherland was not interested in speculation. "Let's open the cargo bay," he said firmly. The team worked quickly, delivering cutting tools and pry bars. The seal held surprisingly well, requiring soldering torches and hydraulic equipment to break through. The moment the doors gave way, a terrible stench burst out. A thick, suffocating mixture of rot, rust, and something indescribable. "Oh, God!" One of the divers choked and staggered back. The lanterns illuminated the room. What they saw made their stomachs turn. The cargo hold was not filled with standard supplies or military equipment. It was filled with bone. First glance, the skeletal remains looked disordered, merging into an unrecognizable mass. But as the team got closer, the reality became much more disturbing. These are not people," the foreman whispered. Claire Jennings, her face pale in the spotlight. Sutherland dropped to his knees, scraping a layer of silt off one of the larger skeletons. It was a long, curved skeleton, cat-shaped but massive, much larger than any known large cat. Next to him lay the skull of a bird, surprisingly intact, with a hooked beak that suggested something predatory. Davidson picked up the bone and turned it over in his gloved hands. Doesn't make sense. They belong to exotic animals. He hesitated before adding, "Some of these animals no longer exist." As the forensic team began cataloging the remains, a disturbing pattern emerged. Among the bones were those of a Sumatran tiger, an endangered species, but its skeleton was much larger than normal. A macaw, a bird declared extinct in the wild, a massive lizard whose armored plate was still partially preserved. And then there was an unknown hybrid, a skull that looked like a cross between a wolf and a big cat. Sutherland watched as the team packed up the remains, their faces filled with confusion. How the hell did a plane full of exotic animal skeletons end up at the bottom of the ocean? He asked. Nobody had an answer. Then Jennings discovered a small, rusty metal box wedged between two broken crates. Inside was a stack of water-damaged documents. The papers were fragile. The ink has faded. But one thing stood out: the logbook. Sutherland flipped through the pages, looking at the last entry. Although the last words were partially blurred, they were frightening. The cargo was unsafe. They lied. "If anyone finds this, don't do it." The rest of the sentence was lost to time. The discovery of the flight log caused a wave of anxiety among the crew. The skeletal remains of exotic and extinct animals were strange enough, but the chilling final words hinted at something much worse. Jennings shouted from her desk, "I found something." Everyone crowded around her as she carefully placed the partially legible document on the table. The headline featured the government emblem, but it was still recognizable. U.S. Department of Defense, 1953. "Wait a second," Davidson muttered. "Are you saying that this is a secret military project from the 50s? Jennings looked over the paper. "Looks like a shipping list." This was not just a random collection of animals. They were sent somewhere. She pointed to a barely discernible destination, a factory in the South Pacific. Sutherland exchanged glances with the team. "We need to find out what this place was." As the investigation deepened, disturbing details began to emerge. Some skeletons showed signs of unnatural growth, with bones belonging to species that were normally much smaller than normal now twice as large. Many showed signs of surgical intervention, suggesting that experimental operations had been carried out. What was most frightening were the fragments of a creature that was unlike anything known to science. "This is not just a collection of exotic animals," Jennings noted quietly. "It was something more, something secret." The team's worst fears were confirmed when they discovered bullet holes in the cockpit and claw marks on the cargo hatches. The final pages of the flight log revealed a horrifying truth. Something is happening with the cargo. They make sounds. One of them is still alive. Sutherland assembled the crew. "We are finishing our work, but this will remain between us. We are reporting a crash, but we have no details about who we believe survived. It never leaves our ship." Jennings looked at Sutherland with growing concern. "What about the signs of mutilation?" The commander's expression was unreadable. "Save the remains. I will contact the Pentagon." As the crew completed the ascent, Sutherland looked out at the ocean. The plane was hidden for 70 years, and now its dark secrets have come to the surface. Some things were never meant to be found, and some might have been meant to remain buried forever.